Now we're recording. So we were recording, but I hit a button and it was like, okay, you're done recording.
And we are recording a very special episode.
We are. This is our first advanced screening. Because, we are very important international businessmen.
Yes.
So important that we got
an advanced
screening to the Black Phone.
And let me say, this is why this is important to me. Usually, I am of the philosophy, fuck your spoiler warning.
Yes.
But because it's an advanced screening, I am not of the philosophy, fuck your spoiler warning today.
Yeah, we'll talk spoiler later.
We will, but I think it's okay to warn. However, I should say, if you haven't seen something and you're worried about spoilers, you should not be listening to anything over 10 minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
That's talking about that thing. So, fuck your spoiler warning. But the Black Phone.
The Black Phone. So,
did you share an agenda with me?
I did not. Let me share it. But we were able to get an advanced screening of this movie because I am a big fancy businessman and I have stock in AMC.
A filthy capitalist.
Wow.
Us reasonable men of the working class invest in reliable companies like Amazon.
Like Amazon. What have they done for you?
Here's the most evil thing I've done. I've invested my mom in Sinclair Broadcasting.
Oh, no.
Because Marquee Network, the Cubs station, is by Sinclair.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, this will only be a good business move.
Oh.
I know they're the devil, but let's buy some stock.
Well, unlike your investments, my investment came with benefits. I got a free popcorn.
What?
Yeah, when you sign up, they give you a free large popcorn.
Probably worth more than actual dividends for certain stocks.
Probably.
Yes.
And they do offer some advanced screenings. And I have been able to go to a couple. I went to the Jackass screening.
Nice.
And I wanted to go to the Top Gun screening. The problem with that, it was on peasant screen. And no, I wanted my first time to be with a screen I love.
You can't go into the danger zone on the peasant screen.
Oh, hell no. It needs to be with a screen that I care about.
Yes.
So the Dolby screen.
Absolutely.
But we are going to talk about the Black Phone. We're going to keep it very spoiler light for the first however long we talk about the beginning. And then once we feel like we want to get into the details, and we'll talk about the details.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and take us away with the synopsis for this week.
Finney Shaw, a shy but clever 13-year-old boy, is abducted by a sadistic killer and trapped in a soundproof basement where screaming is of little use. Too sexual.
Very sexual.
When a disconnected phone on the wall begins to ring, Finney discovers that he can hear the voices of the killer's previous victims. And they are dead set. So clever.
Very clever.
Humorous. On making sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to Finney.
Yeah. So this movie, I feel like you can discuss this movie by talking about like different aspects of it without giving a lot away.
Yes.
For starters, I think you got to give praise where it's deserved.
Yeah.
And that's, I believe, everybody in the cast.
All the acting.
From the kids to even the side characters.
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke especially, I think he does a fantastic job.
Parental figures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to kind of go over some of the basics, the main character for our story is Finney. He is like we discussed. He is a small 13-year-old boy. Small. Emphasis on small. They do make a good point that he is a scrawny kid.
Yep.
He is a pitcher. He plays baseball.
Yes.
Very, very talented from at least what they kind of tell us.
But not the most talented.
Not the most talented.
But very talented.
But very talented.
Yeah.
Enough that at least when he plays, like, his opponents do
take him seriously.
Compliment him. Exactly. They go, yeah, you got a hell of an arm, kid.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to introduce you to Finney, because especially with this movie being set in like the 70s, late 70s, right?
Yes.
I mean, what other way is there to introduce a kid back then? Like, it's usually sports.
Lots of backyard activities.
From
this movie is the life that your parents and grandparents talked about having and emphasized that you did not have, my millennial peers.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Being in sports, hanging out with your friends.
Yeah. Biking to their house at night.
Biking, right? Yeah. Sleeping over.
Yeah. The neighborhood is very much is very much an element of this movie.
Yes.
Right. The kids walk to school in packs.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you see that. You get a feeling that even though Finney is not like a social outcast, he is not popular by any means.
Correct.
I mean, he's good enough for his team, so he's got those friends. But I mean, in school, he does get picked on.
In many ways, he is kind of like your quintessential school-aged story protagonist.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Your stereotypical Stephen King.
Yeah. Everything we described. The young boy who's scrawny, right, and then encounters challenge.
Yes.
And spoiler enough to say overcomes. But yes, encounters challenge has an arc, right?
Yes. Yeah. Which is nice because in a lot of
he's a very archetypical hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. Which is what you need in a movie like this, which you don't always get.
Correct.
That's a big criticism of a lot of horror movies, is that your character is kind of the same throughout the whole movie, and the only thing that changes is maybe they fight.
If I think about it, actually, I did not go into today with this observation, but now that we talk about it, there's a lot of emphasis on modern horror, but just I think modern media and movies in general, which kind of aim to deconstruct the white male focused arc, right?
Go on.
Our protagonist in this typically masculine situation is a woman.
Sure, yes.
Right, we're going to be focusing on a black family, right? Jordan Peele, very good for that, right? And if you think about it, like this movie could have been made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? With a lot of these same beats, but it also doesn't feel. It doesn't feel like that's a detriment. Meaning, like there's a female character in this movie who I think is like fantastic and very much a character, and has a lot more to do than she did in the source material.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of dare I say for me as a white man, it's a refreshing take on a white male story.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about it. You don't get that a lot.
No.
Like, I feel like especially lately, you are right. Whatever the story is, this is a pretty standard kidnapping story, I feel. I mean, that's the premise. If you've seen a trailer for this, you know it's a kidnapping story. Yeah. But I feel like, especially nowadays, you get a lot of like it's a woman, or it's somebody like you mentioned, a minority who's been.
And let me be clear: this is not me saying we need more white male representation.
No,
right? I'm saying, to this movie's credit, it took less than original character elements, right, and then did something fun and exciting with them.
Yeah, because I feel like that's where a lot of these things have been, right? Like, they want to explore like the new horrors,
right,
which is the way that women are treated and the way that minorities can be treated. And usually you kind of go, another white boy, whatever.
Right.
But you do feel for this kid. And to kind of pivot, we mentioned like the other characters, his sister in the movie.
Awesome.
It's fantastic.
Personality up the wazoo.
A lot. She is. You know when they say that someone has moxie?
Yeah.
I feel like this girl is the embodiment of someone having moxie.
I like the actress and character of young Princess Leia in Obi-Wan, right? I would say that for Disney Star Wars, this kid has moxie. I think this character makes her moxie look like Eeyore.
Yeah,
Right?
so you watch to go with
Yeah.
your thing of Princess Leia, like it feels like, hey, you're playing a girl with moxie.
Yeah,
play it up.
Yeah,
Whereas
this girl's
in
not playing
this,
a girl with moxie.
yeah, no, this girl has that
She
moxie
has
and
moxie.
she is running with it.
Yeah.
There is not to go into spoilers, but there is one particular scene where she gets into a fight with her, like not with her brother, but she is helping her brother with a fight.
Yeah.
And just goes all in. This girl commits. She is ride or die.
She goes all in. She commits, and she gets it.
She gets it.
She gets it.
She gets it. So that's her. Ethan Hawke. He plays our main antagonist.
Yeah.
He does not get a name.
Nor does he need one.
Nor does he need one. He is just known as the Grabber, which is a difference from the source material. In the source material, he does get a name.
He has a name and is very physically different.
Yes.
And this is not a visceral detail, in my opinion. He's purposefully physically the way he is in the source material. He's not described like that at all in this.
Yeah, no, you don't, and you don't need that either. I feel like he does a perfectly good job being intimidating.
Yep.
In this movie, whenever he is on screen, there is like a feeling of like unsettling. Like,
yes. It feels up there with Buffalo Bill.
Yes.
With the Joker, right?
Yeah.
It's that level of bad.
which is really funny to consider, because like I feel like this guy has to be a really good actor outside of his extracurriculars.
Yeah.
To not rub people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because if I saw this motherfucker walk into a store and I look at him, I'd be like, oh.
Well, here's the thing. All right, so can we give our rating and spoilers now?
Sure. Okay. You know, we're 12 minutes in.
Yeah.
At this point,
fuck your spoiler warning.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah. At this point, if you're going to be interested in watching this, go see it. It comes out. I'm gonna put out this video Friday.
Yes.
Movie comes out on Friday the 24th.
Yes.
Go see it. It's really, really good. It's not super scary.
Yeah.
But it is very suspenseful. It is very gripping.
Yes. Moving? Like you feel emotionally.
Oh yes. Yes.
It's got catharsis.
You get arcs.
Yep.
From multiple characters, I feel.
Exactly. I'm doing a Letterboxd this year. This is the first movie that's gotten a 4.5 out of 5 for me. Very, very. I loved it. My highest score so far has been a 4.
And I have questions for you on that score a little bit later when we get into spoilers. But
the last thing I'll say before we get into spoilers is if you are like me and you love A24, but you think A24 is kind of like past its peak, this movie for me got the quality of A24 without feeling like an A24 movie. It's not a slow burn, right?
Nope.
It's not artsy fartsy.
Nope.
But just as good, I would say. Just this up there with the Hereditaries, the Witches of the world.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because you feel like a lot of times that people go, oh, it's just another horror movie from whatever big production company, and it just goes to show like all you really need is a solid screenplay, a director who knows what they're doing, and a good cast.
Yeah, Blumhouse did it for me, so go see it. Yeah, please go see it.
Go see it. All right, so now we are officially in fuck your spoilers territory.
Fuck your spoilers.
Fuck your spoilers. Yeah. So what did you wanna get into right away?
So, what were we discussing before we?
we were talking about Ethan Hawke and how he's different from.
Yeah. And how if you ran into him on the street, that would be.
Yeah. You could tell this guy's got some kits in his basement.
So here's what's interesting. This is the original short story. This is spoilers for the short story as well, which is
it's very similar. I feel like when I listen to it, there's nothing in there that's different enough.
I recommend seeing the movie first and then reading the short story because I feel like the movie is a much fuller version, a much more fleshed out version of what the short story offered. The short story I don't think is bad.
For a short story, it's great.
And it's a short story. This is not like a Bartleby the Scrivener short story.
On Scribd, there's a professional read version of it, and it's 40 minutes.
Yeah, about 7,500 words.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah. So, the short story takes place with not a designated time period, but there's nothing in the short story to suggest that it's taking place other than when it was written.
Yeah.
And it's published in a book called 20th Century Ghost Stories, so I think that should lead you to assume that it should take place in a contemporary time, even though there's nothing that definitely says took place in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think the choice to have it take place in the 70s was smart because, like you said, Ethan Hawke just might be very unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've personally met people whose glory days were the 70s, some of these are just these offsetting, gross, disgusting people. I'll give you an example. There was a maintenance man at the hospital I used to work at who was good friends with this other guy I worked with who was very nice, but for all intents and purposes, he was white trash. Right. I hope.
Fair.
Yeah. So he was like, man, tell me about, well, it was the 60s, but, he would have experienced it all. He's like, man, what was it like living in the 60s? And he's like, the maintenance guy was like, all you cared about was getting drunk and getting pussy. Right?
Oh.
I had never met this man before. He was very fine with this being his first impression of me. And just the hairstyles back then, the griminess back then, while I agree that Ethan Hawke's character would have needed to put on some acting to not be unsettling, it was an unsettling time, or at least it was perceived as being a very unsettling time. We were not as conscious about protecting kids back then as we are now, right? Mm-hmm. Media back then wasn't what it is now. You could be a very creepy, unsettling person, and your family would just be like, "This is Uncle Joe.
This is Uncle Joe. This is my brother, and he just happens to have a locked garage door.
Drink his Tang in his powder jar."
Yeah. And there is something to it, right? I remember thinking it was very weird watching the movie, not in a bad way. Yeah. This is one of the early scenes where you see Finney and Gwynnie going home. Yeah. And she's just like, all right, see you later. Yeah. Take care of Dad. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, do they not live together? Yeah. I was a little confused. And then, I was like, well, no. She's just going to a sleepover.
Because by then it's been established that their dad is physically abusive, right?
Yes. I don't know that he
or at least an alcoholic.
He's absolutely an alcoholic. Yeah. He doesn't strike me as someone who just beats their kids for the fun of it. Right. I'm not saying that when he does eventually beat the shit out of...
what a scene.
Out of Wynn, yeah.
These kids have nailed crying in their acting.
Yes, and you get two different types of crying here. Yeah. You definitely get my dad is beating the shit out of me, and I'm both sad because he's beating the shit out of me, and I'm angry about it from her. And you get the desperation crying from Finney when he is trapped in the basement.
Neither of which is quiet.
Oh, right? No.
Neither of which is stoic.
Neither of which should be.
Wet, sloppy, probably have mucus running down your mouth.
Oh, probably. And the way she plays that scene, which I thought was not hilarious in the situation, but in the way that they chose to have her play it. Yeah. Because she's getting the hell beat out of her dad with a belt. Yeah. Which, relatable. Yeah. But at one point she grabs a bottle of vodka and she's like, if you hit me again, I will fucking drop this bottle. And I'm like, my goodness.
She is. So I love me some religion, right? Uh-huh. That wasn't sarcastic, viewers at home, by the way. She prays to Jesus. Yeah. Frequently in this movie. Which, as a side note, in the short story, she's not really much of a character.
She's older too.
it hints that she's got something going on.
Yes.
That something is not integral to the plot of the story, but all of her experience with that thing is centered in the occult. She likes tarot cards and she likes fortune tellers.
Yes.
And here, she is religious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she still has the moxie to, when Jesus does not answer her prayer, to be like, Jesus, what the fuck?
Which, like, not gonna lie, that's probably the biggest laugh I think in a serious movie.
Yeah.
In a minute.
Yeah.
But you feel her desperation because she's like, I have something that I can do. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And she's looking for those signs. So it was very, very funny.
Yeah.
To hear her just
have
and like we said, like all that, it just shows her moxie. When we talked earlier about the fight scene, where so Finney has a friend. He's a little Mexican boy. I believe he's Mexican.
Yes.
At least that's the implication.
Latino for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I am not 100% sure on the name.
Me, I forget as well.
But he kind of protects Finney.
Yeah.
This is a really like tough kid where they don't just tell you, "Hey, watch out for the Mexican boy. He is tough." Like they show you that he is beating the hell out of this kid. His name is Robin.
Yes.
He beats the hell out of this racist ginger kid who calls him a beaner, and he just gets his ass kicked.
Continue.
And it shows you a really good dynamic between the two of them. And at one point, Finney's getting bullied, and he tells the bullies, like, hey, if you fuck with Finney, you're fucking with me, and I'm going to fuck you up.
Robin Arellano.
Yeah. Which then, when he ends up getting kidnapped by the grabber, then that leaves Finney without someone to protect him. And that kind of shows you that, like, again, even though he's an athletic kid, he is still very scrawny. He's still very defenseless overall, and he doesn't stand up for himself. You also see that being played out with his sister.
Yeah. When
she is getting beat by her dad, he wants to stand up.
Yeah.
But he doesn't overstep his boundary with his dad. He stays in the family room and just watches her, get just belted.
Yep.
So then it's a nice growth for him in the end when he does eventually overcome that a little bit.
The way this movie handles violence is so excellent because it's never gratuitous. This never becomes a torture porn movie.
Yes, it's realistic.
It's realistic. It's intense, right? It's not PG-13 violence.
Yeah. So going back to that fight, he is fighting. He's getting his ass kicked by 3 kids. He is getting jumped. That's he's getting jumped. There's not a fight. Yeah. But you see his sister get a glimpse of this fight, and she's like, "Oh hell no!"
Yeah.
And she runs in, guns blazing, grabs a rock, and just
like smacks,
cracks a kid's head open.
Yeah. What if it was her moonlight moment? Not with a chair.
Sure.
Right, but with a rock.
Yeah. But then I think the thing I love the most is that as she just hits this kid in the head, one of the friends turns around and just kicks her right in the fucking teeth.
Yeah.
And you see that she's got like a bloody mouth.
Yeah.
And she just like goes out. She like sits by the fence with the kid who she just beat his head open, and they just both sit together.
Yeah.
Like
in there.
Good fight, basically.
Exactly. Which is what fighting was, right? I mean,
I've been in my fair share of like kids fights.
Yeah.
Like we went hard, but never like beat someone with a rock hard.
No.
But I was very impressed by this little girl.
Yeah. But I guess if you hear stories of, speaking as someone who's never been in a fight, right? So I have no authority to speak. But you do hear stories of like, oh, back in the day, like, the bullies would follow you after school, and then all 3 of them would,
jump you.
If that's happening, like, those kids do not have like the wherewithal to like pull their
punches.
I
mean, I don't know if you remember when we were in, I think it was my senior year of high school, so your junior year of high school. Some girl got jumped in the hallway at West.
No.
They beat her up so hard with like a Gatorade bottle. There was blood all over the walls. So I was like, Jesus.
Well, but that's what can happen. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
Exactly.
And yet it never becomes Saw, right? This movie.
Yes, exactly. And they could have, right? So Finney gets kidnapped.
Yeah.
And he gets taken to this weird, like... Weird... I don't want to say it's a rapey dungeon.
No.
There's like a weird feeling where, like, there might be some rapey tendencies.
Yes.
But it's never explicitly said.
Never confirmed. It's always, like, that possibility is always hovering over you.
And I think that adds... to the tension, right? There's a scene, and I noticed this too because it's also in the book.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was like when I listened to it in the book and when I heard it in the movie, and this could be a way that maybe it was written, or the way that maybe it was read when he's doing the narration. But he says, he's like, I'm not gonna hurt you. He's like, I'm not going to do anything you wouldn't like. And there's a very purposeful pause in the movie that is not there in the audio version of the book, where even Finney, like, it shoots back to him and he's kind of like, what the fuck does that mean? And it's so unsettling. That was one of those things that, like, for me, it made my skin crawl a little bit.
It was interesting. So going back to the Robin character, it's never confirmed, but I think you could potentially read sexual tension between him and Finney
a little bit,
right? It's you could write a defensible essay on this topic, right? They never go out to confirm it, but like you could. So you have that element, right? That's maybe there. So when it gets to the point that this creepy, unhinged dude is kidnapping these little boys, right? Like, we're aware of John Wayne Gacy. Yeah. Yes. So, like, that's in the air of the movie that you're breathing as the audience, but it never explicitly says that's happening. And, in fact, in terms of the events that it does describe through our dead characters' lenses, none of them mention any sort of sexual anything.
Yeah. The only one that's a little weird is the one, like, scary jump scare that we get with our dead characters is the one body that's, like, hung kind of like with its back bent.
Yeah.
That was the one that I was like, that looks like a weird position for the body to be. It could be an implication, but again, it's not. It's all just implied, right?
And let me also be clear. I'm not, like, looking for this stuff in the movie. If anything, I'm glad it was able to balance that fear sort of being in your head while still making the conscious choice of saying, no, we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, but it's also, it's hard not to make those, or want to make those connections because of how many cases
there's some fucked up people in this world.
Especially back in the 80s and 70s of, like, these people who would kill boys and they would do Lord knows what with their bodies, right? So, that the setting, I feel like, also played a bit of that because you're like, is this going that way? And there's never a confirmation one way or the other. And so then we do get some playfulness from Ethan Hawke in this movie in a way that is almost childish.
Yes. The masks, the idea that this is a game, right? Like when Finney gets the phone calls from the dead children, like, they specifically mention, like, you're not dead, like, you haven't died. Yeah, they also call it Naughty Boy, right? I think that's literally the name of the game.
The game is called Naughty Boy, but they specifically say, like, you're not dead because you're not playing the game.
Yeah.
So it's this implication that for him, it's like a ritualistic process, right? And this is very serial killery, right? They have a process, and if if the kill doesn't meet this process, then the kill is probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
In a scheduled manner, right? There is one scene where he like brings him the eggs, and he's like, "I brought you breakfast." Yeah. And he's like, "What'd you put in this?" He's like, "Salt and pepper."
Right.
Which he's got a good point. He's like, "Why? I already have you here. I don't need to poison you. Exactly. I don't need to do anything to you."
What a boring serial killer if that was the way he would do it.
It's just like, "Hey, I brought you into my home, and I'm gonna poison you here." Yeah, that'd be stupid.
Exactly.
But it was kind of interesting too, of the way they use the dead kids.
Yes.
To help Finney, which is also different from the story.
Yes.
In the short story, he gets different phone calls, but there's never any voices. The only time he hears a voice is
Yamada, right?
Yamada.
Yep.
And it's just the one voice, the one call that he's like, "Hey, he left you something to fight back with." It's the receiver for the phone.
Which is also interesting because in the short story, Finney is the one who finds all these things, right? He finds the wire. He never finds. There's no freezer, but
there's no freezer.
I think any of his elements of escape, he has found already.
Mm-hmm.
And then Yamada is the one who says, "Now put them together."
Yes.
Right. Which I could see where someone would actually prefer that, but I like that. Like we said earlier, like these dead kids have an arc. Yeah. Right? Like they're still able to help beyond the grave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much a community
effort
thing.
to get them out of there.
Yeah.
Even like the town like menace helps him.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this kid who's like a violent like punk basically.
Yeah, almost as bad as Ethan Hawke. Right?
Yeah, I mean, he gets bumped while playing ping pong, and he just like beats the shit out of a kid.
Yes,
like damn near beats him to death.
Pinball. Excuse me.
What did I say?
You said ping pong.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, pinball. Which like, oh my goodness, imagine almost killing someone over a game of pinball. Like, you know, that's what the days, I guess.
Yeah.
But you do get that feeling of there's some progression happening, right? Every new victim is able to help him with something.
Yeah.
And you also get the feeling that this is happening because of the connection they have to their mom.
Yeah.
To Finney's mom specifically, right? The girl gets visions.
Right.
Or, you know, some sort of like premonition dreams, and Finney has this connection, right? Because they do say that none of the other kids heard voices.
Right.
They do say that they did hear the phones ringing.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some sort of inherent like supernatural element here, but it's not until Finney, who has this connection to the mom who had some sort of thing going on,
right,
that he is able to make the connection, like the clairvoyant connection to these.
And what I like about it is it definitely communicates the theme that it really does take a village, right? Mm-hmm. And usually you see these stories of like community togetherness being the lesson of the day in these much more sunshine and rainbows environments, right? You have your little hamlet, you know, out in the, not Hamlet the character, but you have your little, you know, your little village out between some mountains, right? There's chickens and, you know, we sing songs. Mm-hmm. But this is real Americana, where yes, we were a community, but you know, we were beating the shit out of each other for playing pinball. Our dads were drunk and beat us with belts, right? It's kids working together to survive, kids working with the police characters to survive, right? Even the dad at the end gets somewhat of an arc. And you start to see that about halfway through the movie too. Yeah. So at the beginning, when we mentioned that Winnie gets her shit kicked in by her dad, it's because she talked to the police about visions, right? So, which is very misleading from the trailers, right? I don't know if you saw a lot of the trailers for this, but it's like the trailer implies that she's talking to the police because she is having visions about Finney. Where in the movie, you find out that the reason why she's talking to the police is because she's having visions about the other
previous kids who have gone missing.
Right.
So then that I thought was already kind of like starting to introduce this aspect of, oh, she's going to play a bigger role in this.
Yeah.
And then the dad gets upset.
Yeah.
At first, you're kind of like, well, maybe dad is upset because he feels like the police are onto her because she may have done something wrong.
Right.
But then you later find out that it's because dad is not happy about her having these visions and telling people that she has these visions because mom also had these visions and she ended up committing suicide.
Yeah.
So you kind of understand. It doesn't excuse his behavior by any means, but you start to see where he's coming from. And then about halfway through the movie, she talks to him and tells him, like, hey, I know you don't like me having these visions. And he gets kind of like, starts to get angry.
Right.
But then she says, like, what if these could help us find Finney?
Yeah.
And he does still dismiss her. Like, I believe the scene just kind of like moves on. But then at the end, when they do locate Finney, I think that, like, it finally does click in with that, like, this isn't just in her head. Like, she did.
This is legitimate.
She did lead the police here, which I thought was an interesting twist at the end of the movie.
Yes. I think he asks for their forgiveness, right?
Yes, he seems very apologetic.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, you never know, right?
Never,
with an alcoholic, you never know.
Yeah, but then fair enough, the movie chooses to end there, right? So we can't assume that everything was hunky dory afterwards, but that's at least still.
Yeah. We can't always assume that it's going to be perfect. We also can't assume that it's going to go back to being... But
structurally, that's a point of emphasis that the movie wanted us to focus on.
That's where it chose to end. So, you know, we'll take that as a win, I think.
There was a very interesting scene, and I don't know what I can say about it, just other than the fact that I found it funny and interesting, that involves the dad and Winnie. I forget if Finney's been kidnapped at this point. He probably has. But she has her little, like... religious paraphernalia hidden in her dollhouse, right? And like she's praying, and then you see the dad walk by. He's like, "I know what you're doing in there," right? And like I thought, like he was in on her, like praying, but asking for her psychic powers.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "It's late. You're not supposed to be playing." And then I'm like, interesting, like her, like. A normal dad would see like your kid doing your childhood prayers and be like, good for you. Right, but for her it would be something forbidden, and then he was, playing is what he assumed. So I'm like, that's kind of funny. I don't know what to say about it other than the fact that it's funny, but
I mean, it was an interesting, like, again, there's these ideas where you're thinking this is where the dad's going because he doesn't like this, and he just does not even go there. So, to kind of, start, because I mean, I really don't know how much else we can talk about this without like repeating ourselves too much. When they do show how she is getting these visions, I thought it was an interesting use of this like Super 8 style filming, like old school, like vintage recording camera. Similar to what you saw in like Sinister.
Right.
But it's showing her being inserted into the memories of these kids. Which I'm like, you know what? If this is how Scott Derrickson decides this is going to be his style, using these like old school vintage like styles,
right?
I'm perfectly happy with that. It was interesting to see that scene of I'm not sure on the kid's name, but the one who beats the hell out of the guy with the pinball.
Is it Moose? Or no, Moose might be the first bully. Or Buzz.
It's not Buzz. Buzz is the one that gets his shit. I think it's Maddie.
Yeah.
So when he gets when we get that vision of her seeing what he did, it's overlapped with that is at the same time that Finney is getting the phone call from this kid.
Right.
So that was also an interesting way of showing how like these things are happening almost
concurrently,
right? And then she gets inserted into his memory, and when he is talking to Finney, he's like talking and just like talking nonsense.
Yeah.
But then you find out it's because he's talking to Gwynnie.
Well, and that's what I loved. But then also, so all the kids who he talks to, they kind of repeat and utter these like cryptic lines that seem to be spelling out Finney's doom. But then the irony is when he has that beautiful, satisfying moment of just beating the shit out of this fuckface, right? All those cryptic lines you find out are also geared towards Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Right? Which I think was a fun little play because you think this kid is doomed, right? I thought that him dying was very, very
possible.
well within the realm of possibility.
It could, you know. I mean, if you remember Sinister, it does not have a happy ending.
Yeah, and then I mean, Hereditary, right? Not
Hereditary,
the same director, but I mean, he's Hale Payman, right?
Hale Payman, you know, this could have gone
the other way.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the benefits of not having read the short story first.
Yes.
I did know that this was based on a story by Joe Hill, who is the son of Stephen King. And even with Stephen King, a lot of his stories don't have a happy ending.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of movies like Salem's Lot.
What did you think of the ending? The last scene.
The ending?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on it.
He gets the girl.
Oh. Yeah. He's like, oh. Yeah. He's like, it's good to see you, Fiddy. It's Finn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was... I went back and forth on it for a little bit because I was like, all right, this is...
It's cheesy.
It's cheesy. To quote that one meme of like, this is why I hate video games. It appeals to the male fantasy, right?
Yes.
It appeals to the male fantasy, right? But A, well earned first and foremost, and then B, I think it needs that sort of like humor to really deflate.
So you know what it reminded me of?
Yeah.
Remember, I won't name names, but we had a conversation not too long ago with a group of friends.
Okay.
And we were talking about like sexual fantasies.
Okay.
And they were like, what's your go-to fantasy? And this person, our friend, our acquaintance, mentioned that like he needs to go through this process of like basically saving the girl before he can do anything with the girl in the dream.
So I do not remember that conversation.
We'll have to refresh this conversation.
But it's interesting because remember how I talked about how I loved the way violence was used in this movie. All right, so two things. One, it is June 20th, 2022. The Robb Elementary School shooting at Uvalde, Texas, was less than a month ago, right? There was recently a video from 2014 that went viral on Reddit of another school shooter that is disarmed by a student. Yes. Now, top comment on this thread was like, this kid lived out all our fantasies, right? There is a common fantasy of saving the school,
and saving the day, right? Being the hero, and that's
which he gets, and I think he earns.
Finney,
yes, because he's in such a powerless position. He's against an adult, a white male adult,
someone who overpowered kids who he feels he is inferior to.
Yes, so I think, much like too many comparisons in this little segment, but bear with me. A lot of people hated the Harry Potter epilogue. You may have been one of them. I don't know for sure. But they're like, oh, this was too happy for Harry. And I'm like, look, this motherfucker went through so much shit.
Let him be happy.
Let everybody get married. Like, like who cares? Similarly, cheesy, yes, but yes, let this kid get the girl. Right? Yeah. B, what I loved about the way that this movie handled violence is how satisfying those moments of violence were. Mm-hmm. Whereas at the end, after he gets the final training from Robin, he uses all the tools he's accumulated along his hero's journey, right?
Which I maybe this is me being big dumb, but I didn't think he would use all the tools at the end. I thought he was just going to use the hole. Yeah. And the thing, and that when I saw the grate at the bottom of the hole, when I saw him use the cord to like strangle him. He uses the stakes to get away from the dog.
I didn't predict it either, but yes, it's all very archetypical, right? Like right. So there was the debate on violence in media has crept its head again.
Of course.
Now this is not gun violence in this movie, but it is. No. But it is, it is violence, and I think that this movie kind of shows us the important role that violence in art actually does play, right? There's, even though we're kind of towing lines of this is everybody's fantasy, right? To save the girl or whatever. Even though he didn't save the girl, he saved. But
to save the day, right? To get justice.
That I think is the key word. I think when violence is successful in a lot of art, it highlights that getting of justice, right? And here, like, I know there's people who are too stupid to think critically, but like nobody thinks that this is a realistic situation, right? And I know some people will say like, oh, well, you can't expect everybody to like be able to think like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't think we have to dumb down our art because there's fucking psychos out there.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, like it's today is when I thought of it as kind of like a David and Goliath story. I'm like, there is something satisfying about seeing David beat Goliath.
Yes.
And the movie's not sending the message of like, now go have your own power male fantasy. It's just kind of showing how things are and aren't.
And so if anybody wants to make the argument that this movie shows like that violence is the answer, like I feel like that would be missing the point, right? Yeah. Like the only violence that we see here is really that final struggle.
Yeah.
Like we never really see the grabber be violent towards Finney.
Right.
And we don't see him be violent towards the other kids.
Yeah.
Every time, the only like actual attack that we see is when he attacks Finney, but that's because we are following Finney.
Yeah.
Any other movie that would like to be gratuitous would have shown us Ethan Hawke grabbing the other kids, Ethan Hawke killing the other kids.
Doing ritual.
Whatever, right? But they don't.
Yeah.
They show us what the bodies look like at the end. Some of the kids have cuts on their faces. I believe Maddie, who's like we think he's the asshole kid.
Yeah.
Like his eyes are maybe cut out.
Yeah.
But even that's kind of obscured. Like it's kind of leaving you to kind of fill in those blanks. It's not gratuitous, like we said. It's not showing us the violence for the sake of violence. When the movie resorts to the violence, is when it absolutely needs to.
That and also, I mean, it also reflects an accurate picture of what, as accurate as you can be in fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. Of how it's fucked up to be a kid sometimes.
It
right?
is.
Like the people who are supposed to protect you do the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? The community that is supposed to build you up
pushes
you down and kicks the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Right? So what else is there to do sometimes other than punch back?
Exactly. Yeah. And we mentioned how it was nice to see him at the end of the movie to put everything together. The one character that we haven't talked about is James Ransone. He is he plays Ethan Hawke's brother.
Yeah.
He is this guy who wants to solve this case, right? Yeah. So you're introduced to him. He's like super high energy. He's got the stereotypical conspiracy board.
Yeah.
He's
like a
yeah, but then you find out that he's got like a mirror with cocaine.
Yeah.
And the cops look at him and he's like, ah, shit.
Yeah.
A very fun introduction. And then after that scene ends, like you just see him, he looks defeated. Yeah. He takes a bump, and then the camera pans down,
and you find
out,
and
it's his fucking basement.
This was a lot for me of this movie hinged on this moment, because I think the movie could have fucked itself over there. Now, granted, that character is in the book, right? Or in the short story. It takes a lot of crafting of believability to make us buy into the fact that Ethan Hawke was doing this shit. His brother, who's like trying to solve the case, is right there, and all this is happening under his nose. And I think the movie delivers. The movie made it plausible for me to believe
that he's enough of an idiot.
Yes, like the two houses, right? That's an important element. B, that he's a stupid '70s cokehead, right? The soundproof, it's emphasized that it's a soundproof door, right? So when it panned down and it revealed that his brother was in that house, I was like, ooh, are they gonna fuck this up, right? And they don't. They don't.
They nail it. Yeah. I think there is something where it's implied. I think the book does a little bit better of a job of doing this, kind of letting you know that the brother is not a permanent fixture of this household.
Yes.
I think something must have happened, and now brother has to basically board here.
Yes. Yes.
For whatever reason. And you know what? Yeah. Him being a cokehead, I feel like it's enough of an explanation for me.
Right.
To be like, yep, he must have fucked something up, and now he's here. Yeah. But there is also, I think that is the most violent scene that we get. Yeah. When the brother does finally
find Finney.
Yeah, he's looking at his at his cork board, and he sees the map, and he kind of starts to go, something's off.
Yeah.
My brother has a locked.
And that's the other point where they could have fucked it up right there. But then also his acting, and then how he finally puts pieces together.
And that realization where he's like, oh shit, I knew he had something, but I did not expect it to be this.
Yes, he doesn't explicitly hit his head on his, hit his hand on his forehead.
Yeah, he doesn't face palm.
Stupid me, but he basically did, right? He kind of realizes that it's a face palm moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's when we do see we see Ethan Hawke in the background just walking up to him and just clonk him in the head with an axe, which funny enough doesn't. I thought that was going to be what Finney would use ultimately to kill him.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
Yeah.
He is able to. He digs a hole. Yep. He's able to trip him into the hole. Starts choking him, and then we get that very satisfying. He beats the shit out of him with the phone. Yep. Who he gets trained by Robin to how to fight, how to properly, juke him basically.
Yeah.
And then we get that very satisfying mic drop moment where the phone rings and he's like, it's for you. Yeah. And he puts the receiver up to the ear.
Yeah.
And he hears the voices, doesn't he? Right.
Yes.
And then he just kills him.
Yep.
Very quick.
Yeah.
Right. No, it doesn't need to get violent more than that. It doesn't need to get needlessly gory.
Yeah.
Just nice, quick. He beats the hell out of him, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then that's you get your satisfaction of he figured this out.
Yeah, you get to see him reunited with his family.
You get to see him reunited with the family.
You get to see him get the girl.
You get to see him get the girl, right? Yeah. You get the catharsis of he's been through all this shit.
Yeah.
He earned
his nickel.
He earned his it's Vin now.
Yeah.
Line. I feel like any other movie it would have felt needlessly cheesy.
Now I think you could have ended the movie before him going back to school, and I would have been happy. And if you told me there was an alternate universe where they added that, I'd have been like, that's fucking stupid. But after having seen it, I approve. And I think it's interesting. There's 3 points where you could end this movie. You could end it with the kill, right? You could end it with the reuniting with the family, and then you could end it with that epilogue in school. And I'm glad we got all 3.
One of the things that I find the most unbelievable about this ending is that it's a small town.
Yeah.
Ain't no way the whole town doesn't know that this happened. and he just walks on in, and the teacher doesn't even say hi. He just walks into the room.
It was the 70s.
I guess
teachers could get away with to all you old teachers out there, you had a much easier job than we do. They could get away with just like reading the newspaper. Like, as they're, You're
not wrong.
Yeah.
Good time.
Good time.
This is a very good time.
Very, very
I was very happy that we got to go see it. Yes, it was a bit of a longer drive than usual to AMC because this was the closest one that was playing it.
Yeah.
I've heard people who have reviewed this say they drove way further.
Yeah.
Somebody that I know, they're like they drove 2 hours to go see this.
Does the public know where we live?
I don't think so,
dude.
In the Chicagoland area.
So for all the talk about for the town that we live in being quote unquote far away from everything, it's not. It's very easy to get to.
We are a 45-minute drive from downtown Chicago.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, right. That's where everything needs to be.
We're a half hour from where we saw this movie, right? It's very easy to get to where we need to get to.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to see a limited screening of 1917, that was at the
same theater?
River East.
Oh,
in downtown
in
Chicago,
the city.
In the city. That was a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. There really is nothing else to talk about this because the movie is not out.
You wanted to ask about my rating?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you rated this your highest so far, a 4.5.
Yeah. What
movies have you actually rated a 5, and what would it have taken for this movie to be a 5?
None on Letterboxd yet. Here, let me. So I think Hereditary is a 5.
Uh-huh.
I think, for me at least, not that Hereditary has like one specific theme, but I think it's the things that it argues are very, very resonant. Right? It's easy to pick up on it. Same for me with The Witch. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's another 5 for me.
The Witch, really?
Yeah, I love The Witch.
Interesting.
This is going to sound very pretentious, but hear me out. I don't think this movie is as quote unquote smart as those movies.
Fair.
And if it had that, then maybe it would get the extra half star.
Okay.
But goddamn, does it do everything else? And it's no dumb movie. It's not. It's a very accessible.
That's the difference.
It's a very accessible good movie.
I feel like I could make Katie watch this. Katie's my wife.
My wife.
For anybody who may not know us.
Yeah. For our millions of fans.
My goodness, getting Katie to watch a horror movie and agree that it's good or bad is very difficult.
Yes.
She famously hates Hereditary.
Yeah.
She's like, this movie is just too. It's too smart for its own good. Yeah. She found The Witch to be very boring.
Yeah.
I feel like the benefit of this movie is that I think it's way more accessible.
Yes.
Which then it also is like, can't get terribly complex.
Right.
It's a very straightforward movie.
Which, by the way, all of you, young people who are trying to go on a date, and you want your squeamish significant other to sort of like jump in your arms in the theater.
This movie will do it.
This is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
The stereotype is.
You get to be the guy.
You get to be the guy. At the end, you can look at your wife or your girl and be like, "I'm Finn."
Yeah.
I really did like this movie a lot.
Yes.
It's up there for me this year with Top Gun as one of my favorite movies of probably the year, definitely the summer.
Yep.
And I will probably be going back to watch this at least once or twice more.
I want to see it again.
But other than that, I mean, there's really no other information. I don't know the budget. It doesn't look to be high budget at all.
No.
Very low budget. It does everything right as far as keeping itself small enough, but still competently well made.
RT critics give it 7.9 out of 10.
That's the average.
Yeah.
But it's also only like 20-some reviews.
Yeah.
So, some of them could be like 6s or 7s. Some of them could be 9s or 10s. but it does have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from both top critics and all critics.
I think maybe one thing I want to leave us with is that I really enjoy the horror genre because of its versatility. There is a surprising amount of what you can do in horror. Mm-hmm. And let me just be ambitious and hyperbolic here. Maybe more than a lot of other genres, right? Like you could say, oh, go see The Black Phone, and people would be like, what kind of movie is it? And you could say a horror movie, and they could have a totally different idea, mm-hmm. right, of like what type of horror movie it is, right? There are still different types of action movies, right? But I think your scope of what action can be, even though it's such a broad name, right, mm-hmm. is kind of maybe even more narrow of what horror mm-hmm. can do. And I think this movie's a fresh take on what horror can do. It's a good time.
So before we close off, to your point about how versatile horror is, one of my favorite YouTube channels for the past 4 years has been Dead Meat.
Yeah.
They do a show called The Kill Count where they go through horror movies and they talk about the movie and they go into detail about the production. But the main point of it is, hey, look who died here, at this point, and how many people died at the end of the thing. But looking at the various movies that they cover in this channel, like, it really kind of puts that point that you made into perspective of just how diverse the horror genre is. Yep. I mean, just from simple movies like Halloween, just your standard slashers, to like Zombieland, your horror comedies. Right? Yeah. They talked about The Witch, Blumhouse, Hereditary. Yeah. Like, there are just so many different movies, and it kind of sucks that
it's a second fiddle genre. It's treated as a second fiddle genre.
And I think that's the biggest disservice for it, because there are a lot of movies that...
Well, here, who's the most famous American short story novelist or short story?
Stephen King?
Short story.
Oh, short story
in American history.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rich legacy of this genre, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first American short stories ever is Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it has a history, so it's just kind of a shame that, like, you know.
And it sucks because not getting the respect it deserves. Yeah. And a lot of it, like, if it's done well, it's timeless.
Yep.
You can use the same stories for whatever.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Very good movie.
Very good movie.
We will be back sometime soon.
Yes.
Summer movie season is pretty...
Lot to do.
So I don't know exactly what movie will be next.
Yeah.
I know we definitely have a How I Met Your Mother episode coming on Monday.
Yep.
We're trying to do those. I think I try to do this on Mondays.
Yeah.
Just gives me more time. And then we will see what comes next. But until then, thank you for joining us. You can follow us at the Cine-Scoots on Twitter.
Yes.
Our friend Thano here is going to work on getting us on Apple Podcasts, because I could not figure it out. Tim Apple does not want me, but we are so far.
He heard us talking shit.
Maybe he did, yeah. Yes. But so far we are on Spotify, we are on Google Podcasts, Anchor, and hopefully soon
on These Nuts.
On These Nuts. All right, I'm Javier.
I'm Thano.
Bye.
Bye.